Welcome to Ghost Riders Real Ghost Stories. Welcome to Ghost Riders Real Ghost Stories, where the supernatural meets reality. Join us as we delve into spine-chilling tales of ghosts, hauntings, and unexplained phenomena shared by real people. Get ready to question what you thought you knew about the world around you. Tonight's episodes include the Speakeasy, Ball, the Grey Lady, and boom! Haunted train station. Buckle up, because you're about to embark on a journey into the unknown. Let's get started. The Speakeasy. In the shadowed streets of 1920s Chicago, amidst the cacophony of jazz clubs and speakeasies, stood a bar that even the bravest of souls dared not enter after dusk. The establishment, known to locals as the Bicycle Club, was a popular haunt for the city's most notorious figures, a place where deals were struck and lives were ended with a whisper and a bullet. The walls of the bar, hidden beneath layers of cigar smoke and the clinking of glasses, bore silent witness to the crimes of the era. The bar was owned by a ruthless gangster named Victor Mad Dog Russo, a man whose mere presence could instill fear in the hearts of men. Russo's reputation for violence and his almost supernatural ability to evade capture earned him his chilling moniker. His empire thrived during the Prohibition, feeding off the desperation and vices of the city's residents. One cold winter night, as the wind howled through the narrow alleyways, a deal was set to take place in the back room of the Bicycle Club. Russo, dressed in his usual dark suit and fedora, awaited the arrival of his associates. The room was dimly lit, the flickering light casting long, sinister shadows on the walls. The air was thick with the scent of whiskey and fear. The door creaked open, and in walked Tony the Knife Gallo and Salvatore Silk Marconi, two of Russo's most trusted lieutenants. They were followed by a group of nervous-looking men, each carrying a briefcase filled with cash. The men placed the briefcases on the table, their hands trembling as they awaited Russo's inspection. "Good evening, gentlemen." Russo's voice was smooth, yet laced with menace. "Let's get down to business, shall we?" As Russo inspected the money, a tense silence fell over the room. The only sound was the distant murmur of patrons in the bar, blissfully unaware of the sinister dealings taking place mere feet away. Satisfied with the amount, Russo nodded, and the men visibly relaxed. But their relief was short-lived. A sudden crash echoed from the bar, followed by the sound of raised voices and breaking glass. Russo's face darkened, and he motioned for Gallo and Marconi to investigate. The two men hurried out, leaving Russo alone with the newcomers. "What was that?" one of the men dared to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing to worry about," Russo replied, his eyes cold and calculating. "Just a minor disturbance." But it was far from minor. As Gallo and Marconi stepped into the bar, they were met with chaos. Tables were overturned, and patrons scrambled for the exits as a group of masked men brandished guns, demanding money and valuables. Gallo reached for his weapon, but he was too late. A shot rang out, and he crumpled to the floor, blood pooling beneath him. Marconi, fueled by rage and fear, fired back, taking down one of the attackers before a bullet found its mark in his chest. He fell beside Gallo, their lifeless bodies a testament to the brutality of the night. The masked men, having secured their loot, fled into the night, leaving behind a scene of carnage and despair. Back in the dimly lit room, Russo sensed that something had gone terribly wrong. He drew his gun and moved towards the door, but before he could reach it, a searing pain shot through his back. He stumbled forward, dropping his weapon as he clutched at the wound. He turned to see one of the newcomers, a smirk playing on his lips, holding a smoking revolver. "Why?" Russo gasped, his vision fading. "It's just business, Mad Dog," the man replied coldly. "Nothing personal." Russo's body hit the floor with a thud, the life draining from his eyes. The men quickly gathered the briefcases and fled, leaving the bicycle club in ruins. The bar, once a symbol of Russo's power, became a place of mourning and fear. The bodies were removed, and the bar was hastily cleaned, but the bloodstains remained, seeping into the very fabric of the building. As the years passed, the bicycle club fell into disrepair. The whispers of its haunted past kept people away, and it stood as a decaying monument to the violence that had once thrived within its walls. The ghosts of the past lingered, their restless spirits unable to move on from the horrors they had witnessed. Moving forward to the year 2018, the city of Chicago had transformed dramatically, yet the shadows of its past lingered in the forgotten corners. One such corner was the derelict building that once housed the bicycle club. Its boarded-up windows and crumbling facade were a stark contrast to the bustling streets around it. To most, it was just an eyesore, but to others, it was a relic of a darker time. For Eric Thompson, a real estate developer with a penchant for revitalizing old buildings, the property represented an opportunity. He saw potential in the decaying structure and envisioned transforming it into a trendy bar that would attract the city's young and affluent crowd. The stories of hauntings and mobster ghosts were nothing more than urban legends to him, mere myths that added a touch of intrigue to the property. Eric purchased the building at a steal, unaware of the sinister history that came with it. He quickly assembled a team of workers to begin the renovations, eager to bring his vision to life. The work was arduous, and the building seemed to resist their efforts at every turn. Strange occurrences became commonplace. Tools went missing, lights flickered inexplicably, and the workers reported hearing faint whispers when they were alone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Eric decided to stay late and inspect the progress. The building was eerily quiet, the only sound being the distant hum of the city outside. He walked through the dimly lit rooms, his footsteps echoing off the bare walls. The temperature seemed to drop as he reached the back room, and he felt a chill run down his spine. He noticed a strange, dark stain on the floor, a remnant of the violent past that had once unfolded there. He knelt down to get a closer look, but as he did, he felt a sudden, sharp pain in his back. He gasped and spun around, but there was no one there. The room was empty, yet the sensation of being watched was palpable. Shaking off the feeling, Eric stood and made his way to the bar area. As he inspected the space, he heard the faint sound of music, an old jazz tune that seemed to come from nowhere. The melody was haunting, and it grew louder, filling the room with an otherworldly presence. Eric's heart raced as he followed the sound, which led him to a corner of the bar. There, he saw a shadowy figure dressed in a dark suit and fedora. The figure turned slowly, revealing a face twisted with rage and sorrow. It was Victor Russo, the mad dog himself. Eric stumbled back, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. The ghostly figure raised a hand, pointing directly at him, and the room was suddenly filled with the sounds of gunfire and screams. Eric fled the building, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he emerged into the night. He knew that what he had experienced was real, and the weight of the building's history pressed heavily on his mind. He couldn't shake the image of Russo's vengeful spirit, nor the chilling sensation of the ghostly presence that still lingered within the walls. Determined to uncover the truth, Eric delved into the building's past, uncovering the gruesome history of the bicycle club. He learned about the violent deaths that had occurred there, the ruthless reign of Victor Russo, and the whispers of hauntings that had kept people away for decades. As he pieced together the story, he realized that the spirits of the past were still bound to the place, trapped by the violence and betrayal that had marked their final moments. Eric knew that he had to find a way to bring peace to the restless souls, to release them from the torment that had held them captive for nearly a century. He sought the help of a local historian and a spiritual medium, hoping to cleanse the building and free the spirits. The medium, an elderly woman with a deep understanding of the supernatural, conducted a ritual to communicate with the ghosts. She sensed their pain and anger, and with great effort, she managed to make contact with Victor Russo's spirit. Through the medium, Russo revealed his regret and sorrow for the lives he had taken and the suffering he had caused. He spoke of the betrayal that had led to his own death and the endless torment of being trapped in the place where he had committed so many sins. The medium, with Eric's help, performed a cleansing ritual, offering forgiveness and release to the spirits. As the ritual concluded, a sense of peace settled over the building. The oppressive atmosphere lifted and the temperature returned to normal. Eric felt a profound sense of relief, knowing that the spirits had finally found rest. He completed the renovations, transforming the bicycle club into a vibrant, welcoming space that honored its history while embracing a brighter future. The bar quickly became a popular destination, known not only for its stylish decor and lively atmosphere, but also for the stories of its haunted past. Visitors would often share tales of the ghostly encounters that had once plagued the building, marveling at the transformation that had taken place. Eric, now a firm believer in the supernatural, took pride in knowing that he had played a role in bringing peace to the restless souls of the bicycle club. The bar's dark history had been laid to rest, and it stood as a testament to the power of redemption and the enduring spirit of the city of Chicago. Regulars, however, believe that Mad Dog and pals still haunt the place. Things move, disappear, and even fly off the shelves, and cigar smoke fills the air, especially when Mad Dog takes a dislike to particular patrons. Our next story is The Grey Lady. The Grey Lady. Nestled on the outskirts of a small town in England, the Victorian house stood with an air of quiet dignity, its grandeur long faded but not forgotten. The locals referred to it as the Grey Lady, a name that carried a mixture of reverence and fear. The house, built in the late 19th century, was a masterpiece of Gothic architecture, with its tall, narrow windows, intricate stone carvings, and ivy-covered walls. It exuded an eerie charm, a beauty shrouded in mystery and shadow. The house had a tragic history, known to those who dared to listen. It once belonged to a woman named Eleanor Wharton. She was a paragon of strength and grace, a loving wife and mother whose life was marred by a series of devastating tragedies. Eleanor's husband, Robert, met his untimely end in a construction accident, leaving her to raise their children alone. One by one, her children fell victim to the cruel hand of fate. Smallpox claimed her youngest, the Spanish flu took her eldest, and a tragic accident stole her middle child. The once vibrant Eleanor was left a hollow shell of her former self, her heart hardened by grief and loss. As the years passed, Eleanor became a recluse, her sorrow transforming into anger and bitterness. She vowed that no one would ever again find peace within her home. When she passed away, her spirit remained, bound to the house by the pain and rage that consumed her. The Grey Lady, as she came to be known, exacted her revenge on anyone who dared to move into her domain. In the autumn of 1923, the house was sold to the Turner family, a young couple eager to escape the bustling city and start anew in the countryside. Henry Turner, a man of practical disposition, and his wife, Margaret, a gentle soul with a love for the old and the beautiful, were charmed by the house's faded grandeur and the promise of a fresh start. The first few days were uneventful as the Turners settled into their new home, unpacking boxes and arranging furniture. The house seemed to welcome them, its dusty rooms coming alive with the sounds of laughter and conversation. However, it was not long before the Grey Lady made her presence known. On their first night in the house, as the clock struck midnight, Margaret awoke with a start. The room was unnaturally cold, and the air seemed heavy with an unseen presence. She glanced around, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. The flickering candle on the bedside table cast eerie shadows on the walls. Suddenly, she felt a cold hand brush against her cheek, followed by the faint sound of whispering in her ear. She gasped, her heart racing as she sat up in bed, her breath visible in the frigid air. "Henry, wake up!" she whispered, shaking her husband's shoulder. He groaned and turned over, still half asleep. "There's something here!" Henry opened his eyes, frowning. "What are you talking about, Margaret?" "It's just your imagination." But Margaret was insistent. "No, I felt it. There's something in this room." Henry sighed and got out of bed, lighting a candle to illuminate the room. He checked the windows and doors, finding them all securely shut. "There's nothing here, Margaret. Go back to sleep." Reluctantly, Margaret lay back down, but sleep did not come easily. She could still feel the cold touch on her cheek and hear the faint whispering, a reminder that they were not alone. The next day, Henry dismissed the incident as a figment of Margaret's imagination, but she could not shake the feeling of unease. As the days passed, strange occurrences became more frequent. Lights flickered on and off without explanation. Doors slammed shut with no one nearby, and furniture moved seemingly on its own. One evening, as Henry sat in the study reading, the chandelier above him began to sway. At first, he thought it was a draft, but the windows were closed. The swaying became more violent, and the light flickered, casting ominous shadows around the room. Henry felt a chill run down his spine. He put down his book and stood up, watching in disbelief as the chandelier continued to swing. "Margaret!" he called out, his voice echoing through the empty halls. Margaret hurried into the study, her eyes wide with concern. "What is it, Henry?" "Look," he said, pointing to the chandelier. "There's no reason for it to be moving like that." Margaret looked up, her face pale. "It's her, Henry! It's the Grey Lady!" Henry scoffed. "Nonsense, there's no such thing as ghosts." But even as he said it, he could not ignore the evidence before him. The house was alive with an unseen presence, one that did not take kindly to their intrusion. The haunting escalated over the following weeks. The Grey Lady's wrath was relentless, her anger manifesting in increasingly violent ways. At night, the Turners were plagued by terrifying dreams, vivid and disturbingly real. They dreamt of a woman with hollow eyes and a twisted smile, her hands cold as death as she reached out to touch them. They would wake up in a cold sweat, their bodies aching as if they had been physically assaulted. One night, Henry awoke to a searing pain in his chest. He looked down and saw deep scratches running across his skin, fresh and bleeding. He cried out, waking Margaret, who gasped in horror at the sight. "Henry, what happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," he replied, his voice filled with pain and confusion. "I felt something attacking me in my sleep." Margaret's fear turned to determination. "We can't let her drive us out, Henry. This is our home now." But the Grey Lady had other plans. She continued her torment, making the house a living nightmare. The lights flickered more frequently, plunging them into darkness at the most inconvenient times. Doors slammed shut with such force that the frames shook, and furniture was overturned, as if by an invisible hand. One evening, as Margaret prepared dinner, the knife she was using flew out of her hand and embedded itself in the wall. She screamed, backing away from the kitchen counter. Henry rushed in, his face pale. "What happened?" Margaret pointed to the knife, her hands shaking. "She's trying to hurt us, Henry. We have to do something." Determined to reclaim their home, Henry and Margaret decided to confront the Grey Lady. They consulted local historians and learned more about Eleanor Wharton's tragic past. Armed with this knowledge, they hoped to find a way to appease her restless spirit. One night, they gathered in the parlour where the haunting seemed most intense. The air was thick with tension, and the flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows on the walls. "Eleanor Wharton," Henry called out, his voice strong and steady. "We know your story. We know the pain you've endured. We understand why you're angry, but we mean you no harm. We want to live in peace." For a moment, the house was silent, as if the very walls were listening. Then, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles. The grey lady appeared before them, her ghostly form translucent and shrouded in sorrow. Her eyes, once filled with anger, now held a glimmer of recognition. Margaret stepped forward, her heart pounding. "Eleanor, we don't want to fight. We want to help you find peace." The grey lady's expression softened, and for a moment it seemed as though she might relent. But then, her face twisted in rage, and she lunged at Margaret, her hands outstretched. Henry intervened, standing between Margaret and the spirit. "No more, Eleanor! You must stop this!" The grey lady hesitated, her form flickering as if caught between two worlds. Finally, she let out a mournful wail and vanished, leaving the room in an eerie silence. The Turners were left shaken but resolute. They continued to live in the grey lady's house, determined to coexist with the spirit that haunted its halls. Over time, the haunting became less frequent, as if Eleanor's spirit had finally found a semblance of peace. Though the grey lady's presence could still be felt, she no longer sought to drive them out. Instead, it seemed as though she had accepted them, allowing them to live in her home without fear of further attacks. The Turners never forgot the lessons they learned during their time in the haunted house. They came to understand the depth of Eleanor Wharton's sorrow and the power of her love for her family. They respected her memory and the sacrifices she made, and in doing so, they found a way to share the house with her spirit. The Grey Lady remained a part of their lives, a silent guardian who watched over them from the shadows. And though they never saw her again, they felt her presence in the flicker of a candle, the rustle of the wind, and the quiet creak of the floorboards. The house, once a place of sorrow and anger, became a home filled with love and understanding. The Turners' story became a legend in the town, a reminder that even the most restless spirits can find peace when shown compassion and respect. And so, the Grey Lady's tale was passed down through the generations, a testament to the enduring power of love and the resilience of the human spirit. Our final story is the haunted train station. The haunted train station. In the heart of the Midwest, in a small town surrounded by endless fields of corn and wheat, stood a train station that had witnessed the comings and goings of countless souls. Built in the late 19th century, the station was a grand structure of red brick and iron, with a tall clock tower that loomed over the tracks. Its arched windows and intricate stonework spoke of a time when train travel was the pinnacle of modernity and adventure. During World War II, the station played a crucial role as a receiving depot for soldiers and sailors returning home from the front lines. The air was thick with the bittersweet mix of joy and sorrow as families reunited with their loved ones or faced the heart-wrenching task of claiming the remains of those who had fallen in battle. The freight warehouse at the station became a temporary resting place for the coffins of soldiers killed in action. The wooden crates, draped in the American flag, were stacked neatly, waiting for their families to come and take them home. However, not all the fallen were claimed. Some families had moved away, others had perished themselves, and some simply could not afford to make the journey. These unclaimed coffins were eventually buried in a potter's field, a final resting place for the forgotten. The station was haunted by the restless spirits of these brave men, trapped in a limbo between life and death. They were stuck at the station, unable to move on to the other side. Their presence was felt in the cold drafts that swept through the halls, the faint whispers that echoed in the night, and the eerie glow that sometimes appeared in the windows. The station master, long dead himself, had taken it upon himself to guide these lost souls. He was their shepherd, trying to give them peace by directing them to cross over to the other side. But the task was not easy. The spirits were often confused, angry, and sometimes violent. In the fall of 1947, a group of paranormal investigators arrived in the small town, drawn by the stories of the haunted station. They were a diverse group, each with their own reasons for pursuing the paranormal. There was James, the leader, a former soldier who had seen too much death and was searching for answers. Sarah, a medium with a gift for communicating with the dead, had joined the group after losing her husband in the war. Tom, the skeptic, was a scientist determined to find logical explanations for the supernatural. And finally, Mary, a historian, who believed that understanding the past was the key to understanding the present. They set up their base of operations in a small, abandoned house near the station. The air was crisp with the scent of fallen leaves, and the wind carried the distant sound of a train whistle. The station stood silent and imposing, a monument to a bygone era. On their first night at the station, the investigators gathered their equipment and prepared for their initial exploration. The station was eerily quiet, the only sound the creak of the wooden floorboards beneath their feet. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, as if the very walls held their breath in anticipation. Sarah closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, trying to connect with the spirits that lingered in the station. She felt a cold breeze brush past her, and a whisper of a voice in her ear. "Help us," it said, the voice filled with sorrow and desperation. James turned on his flashlight and led the way into the freight warehouse. The room was filled with rows of wooden crates, each one marked with the name of a fallen soldier. The sight was overwhelming, a stark reminder of the cost of war. As they moved deeper into the warehouse, the temperature dropped and the air grew heavy with an unseen presence. Tom's equipment began to beep, detecting a spike in electromagnetic activity. "There's definitely something here," he said, his voice tinged with excitement and fear. Suddenly the room was filled with the sound of footsteps, as if a group of soldiers marched in unison. The investigators froze, their breath visible in the cold air. The footsteps grew louder, and the sound of whispers filled the room. "We are lost," the voices said. "We need to find our way home." As the night wore on, the investigators continued their exploration. They made their way to the station master's office, a small room filled with old maps and timetables. The air was thick with the scent of dust and decay. Sarah sat at the station master's desk and closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind. She felt a presence, strong and commanding, but also filled with a deep sadness. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice soft and gentle.
"I am the station master," the voice replied. "It is my duty to guide these souls to the other side. But I am failing. They are trapped here, unable to find peace."
James stepped forward, his voice filled with determination. "We are here to help. Tell us what we need to do." The station master's presence grew stronger, and the room seemed to come alive with his energy. "You must help me show them the way. They are lost and confused, their spirits bound to this place by their pain and sorrow. We must help them remember who they are and why they are here." The investigators spent the next few days preparing for their first attempt to help the spirits cross over. They gathered information about the soldiers whose coffins remained unclaimed, trying to piece together their stories. They held seances, using Sarah's gift to communicate with the spirits, and conducted rituals to cleanse the station of negative energy. On the night of the full moon, they gathered in the freight warehouse, surrounded by the coffins of the fallen soldiers. The air was charged with energy, and the room seemed to hum with an unseen power. Sarah stood in the center of the room, her hands raised, and began to chant. The words were ancient and powerful, calling out to the spirits and urging them to find peace. The room grew colder, and the air seemed to vibrate with the presence of the spirits. Suddenly, the room was filled with the sound of voices, a cacophony of whispers and cries. The spirits were restless, their pain and confusion palpable. Sarah continued to chant, her voice growing stronger and more commanding. One by one, the spirits began to appear. They were translucent, their forms flickering like candle flames. Their faces were twisted with sorrow and anger, their eyes filled with a desperate need for release. The station master appeared beside Sarah, his presence strong and reassuring. "You must guide them," he said. "Show them the way." James stepped forward, holding a photograph of one of the soldiers. "You are Private John Anderson," he said, his voice steady. "You served your country with honor, and now it is time to rest. Your family loves you, and they want you to find peace." The spirit of Private Anderson looked at the photograph, his expression softening. He reached out to touch it, and as he did, his form grew brighter. The other spirits began to follow suit, reaching out to the photographs and mementos that the investigators had gathered. Despite their efforts, not all the spirits were willing to move on. Some were filled with a deep anger, their pain too great to let go. These spirits became violent, lashing out at the investigators and trying to drive them away. One night, as they conducted a séance in the freight warehouse, the air grew thick with a malevolent energy. The temperature dropped, and the room was filled with the sound of growling and whispers. Sarah's voice wavered as she tried to maintain her connection with the spirits. "We are here to help you," she said, her voice shaking. "Please, let us help you find peace." Suddenly, a force slammed into her, knocking her to the ground. The other investigators rushed to her side, but they were met with an unseen force that pushed them back. The spirits were angry, their rage filling the room with a palpable energy. The station master appeared, his presence strong and commanding. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. "These people are here to help you. You must listen to them." The spirits hesitated, their forms flickering. The station master stepped forward, his presence calming the room. "You are soldiers," he said, his voice filled with authority. "You served your country with honor, and now it is time to rest. You must let go of your anger and find peace." The spirits began to calm, their forms growing brighter. One by one, they reached out to the station master, their expressions softening. The room was filled with a warm, golden light as the spirits began to cross over to the other side. The investigators spent several more weeks at the station, helping the remaining spirits find peace. They conducted rituals and held séances, using their gifts to guide the spirits to the other side. As the weeks passed, the station grew quieter, the air no longer heavy with the presence of the restless spirits. The station master, his duty fulfilled, finally found peace himself. He appeared before the investigators one last time, his expression filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft and gentle. "You have helped me fulfill my duty, and now I can rest." The investigators watched as the station master crossed over, his form growing brighter and then fading into the light. The room was filled with a sense of peace and tranquility, a stark contrast to the tension and sorrow that had filled it before. The investigators left the station, their hearts filled with a sense of accomplishment and gratitude. They had helped bring peace to the restless spirits and had learned valuable lessons about the power of love, compassion, and understanding. The station, once a place of sorrow and anger, became a place of peace and tranquility. The story of the haunted station and the brave investigators who helped the spirits find peace became a legend in the town, a reminder of the enduring power of the human spirit and the importance of compassion and understanding. Epilogue. Years later, the station still stood, a silent monument to the past. The town had grown and changed, but the station remained a place of reverence and respect. The spirits of the soldiers who had once haunted its halls had found peace, their stories remembered and honoured by the townspeople. The investigators had gone their separate ways, but they remained connected by the bond they had formed during their time at the station. They continued their work, helping restless spirits find peace and bringing light to the darkest corners of the world. The story of the haunted train station was passed down through the generations, a testament to the enduring power of love and the resilience of the human spirit. And though the station was no longer haunted, it remained a place of reverence and respect, a reminder of the sacrifices made by those who had come before. And so, the tale of the haunted train station and the brave investigators who helped the spirits find peace came to an end, a story of love, compassion, and understanding that would be remembered for generations to come. We hope you've enjoyed our stories during your commute. Please visit again for more real ghost stories.